Hi guys, Coach Fenz here with the ultimate frother himself, Josh Carlson, all the way over from Vancouver land to help everyone here get better at riding enduros. So thanks again for joining us, mate. It's good to see you.
Good to be here. This is great. Australia rocks, and it's nice to come home and be Australian again and drop a g'day mate and ask just for a water and not have people look at you real funny.
Yep. But he has still got that little twang. You'll hear it as he starts talking because he's sort of Oz Canadian mix going on there, which is a little bit funny, and we are giving it to him.
I'm sorry, I can't help it.
Yeah. Look, what we're going to do here today is just look at a basic bike setup. So we want to talk about, tires, tire pressures. We want to talk about front forks, fork setup. You got the Eagle setup on here, an enduro. There's quite a lot of riding. We're going to talk about that in another piece about actually training for this. But an Eagle allows you to spin a little bit more when you're doing those big days, eh?
Yep.
And run a bigger chain ring.
Yep.
So any of the things, hints and tips, maybe your other shock, anything that you think can help everyone out there get faster on their enduro bike would be fantastic. Thanks, mate.
This is your zone. This is your happy place. There's a lot going on out there at these enduro races, and a lot of the things you can't control, and the tracks are so varied and different difficulties and different terrain and different gradients, and there's so many things going on. You go through a bunch of different ecosystems and dirt and roots and rocks and dust and gravel and grass and you name it, it's in there at an enduro race. So you want to have the best overall setup you can have. You want to be comfortable. So you've got to start with your cockpit and make sure you're comfortable with your levers, your brakes, your shifter, because you're going to be out there for 5, 6, 7 hours sometimes. We have a race in Whistler that the final stage drops in 8 hours after you start. So if you start at 12 o'clock midday, your final stage is at 7:30 p.m. at night. So you want to be comfortable all day. A lot of different settings you can run with suspension as well. So when it gets real steep and real gnarly, I opt for a 180mm lyric up front. So it sits you up a little bit higher, gives you a few extra mil of travel. It also slackens the front end out a little bit. So on those real steep tracks, it sits you up a bit higher so you can see a little more and just makes you a little bit more comfortable. Really pay attention to your O-ring on your suspension. This is your game right here. That helps you figure out how much traction you're getting, how much suspension you're using, and it can also help you figure out which fork you can use. I'm very lucky to have the support of SRAM and RockShox, so I can swap between a 160mm lyric, a 170mm lyric, or a 180mm, and each fork has its own purpose for the right track, and I'll swap them out maybe once or twice during practice, or every race that you go to might be different. We race in Ireland, which is quite a small hill, so you might go for the 160mm fork. We go to Italy, to La Tuile, where it's big mountains and you're on the back of the Mont Blanc, and you want the 180mm fork because you're just flying down massive steep hills. We go back to Whistler and it's bike park. So you want a bigger fork, but you've still got the tight, nimble trail. So then you'll go back to a 170mm fork. So there's a lot of variations there. Very personal. I personally like the 180mm lyric. You can swap from an air shock to a coil shock. Again, this is a fantastic luxury that I'm very proud to have and very appreciative of. I usually go for a coil. I like the consistency of the coil. It settles the rear end down a little bit. It doesn't quite get that heated, erratic feeling that an air shock sometimes does. Some of our descents are 3 to 7 to 15 minutes long. That's a lot of heat build up there in the rear end, and the coil, it only gets better. With the air, it ggets quite hot and quite gnarly. So for me personally, that's my jam. We definitely run the dropper post. That's just a basic necessity these days for enduro. The 150mm reverb has plenty of height for pedaling uphill, so your legs are comfortable. And then every time you go back downhill, it's very low, it's out of the way, it's ideal. It's just a basic necessity like wheels. You need wheels to ride, you need this to descend. There's no questions about it. Another great thing we've had this year is the SRAM Eagle. It's given us such a wide range with a 50-tooth top ring and a 10. So a 50 to a 10 is just a humongous range. So you can now pair that up with a 38-tooth front ring, and you can pedal up the hill easier than you can with a 34, but you still have a 38-10 for your biggest gear. Now that is a monster, and it's rare to find a track anywhere in the world that you'll pedal out a 38-10. If you're pedaling out a 38-10, you're in excess of 70, 80 kilometers an hour, and you are nuking down the hill if you're going that fast. So SRAM Eagle's been a fantastic new piece of equipment that's been released, and the more it develops, I think it'll just become an everyday item for an enduro racer, and it's been awesome. Tires. Now you can spend all day arguing about what tires to run and how much grip you need, and casings and tread pattern, and what rubber compound and all that stuff. What you need to remember is the tires that you run need to last you all day. So if you're out there for 7 hours, that set of tires has to last all day. So if you want to go for a lighter set of tires because it's quite pedally on one stage, you got to weigh up the risks that you take if it gets real gnarly and steep. If you're going to flat that tire, there's your whole race. Your whole race is over for what, 200 grams, 300 grams? These tires are a little bit heavier than what you're used to in cross country, but they are lighter than downhill tires. Very, very important that you pick the right ones. I personally go for the Schwalbe Super Gravity Trail Star in the rear with either a Magic Mary tread pattern, a Nobby Nick, or a Hans Dampf. Now that has a huge variation that covers a varying terrains. Magic Mary in the rear is more for steep terrain. If you need you need a little bit of grip to brake, you need a little bit of tread there to slow down. The Nobby Nick is the best all-round tire. It corners well, it rolls well, it brakes well. That's my favorite tire for the rear. And the Hans Dampf just does everything well. It's round, it's good, it has great puncture resistance, it corners okay. It's really good for the smoother rolling terrain, and it's very good for puncture resistance. So Schwalbe gives us a great, range of tires to choose from. And again, we change them every event according to what we need and what we think is the best option. Up front, it's rare that I personally would ever change a Magic Mary Super Gravity Vert Star front tire. It's got plenty of grip, plenty of tread. I really love the front end feel of it, so it'd be rare to see me ever change that unless conditions dramatically change. You might put a Dirty Dan, which is a mud spike from Schwalbe. Those bad boys are massive, and they are only for the most extreme muddy conditions. So yeah, my go-to tires is a Magic Mary up front and usually a Nobby Nick in the rear, both in Super Gravity carcass. They're very sturdy, they're very puncture resistant, and yeah, that's my go-to setup. Another thing you can change with your wheels is your brake rotors. So usually I stick with the 180mm guide brakes, but sometimes when we go to Europe, you got some massive descents. So you might want to have the option of going to 200mm rotors. 200mm rotors, they're extremely powerful, but if anything, it's the heat resistance that they offer that is better than the 180mm. Having a 200mm rotor, it just gives you a little bit more leeway. They don't burn out quite as fast. You do have that extra grip there when you need it, and that extra braking power, because sometimes with the 180s, they're good, but when they run out and you're still going downhill, there's nothing left. 200mm gives you a little bit to play with, so again, that's another option to go for. And yeah, that's pretty much the basic setup and what I run.
Beautiful, mate. And any difference with frames? Because obviously this Giant is your Rain. You do actually sometimes on courses, I think over in Ireland, go to a Trance?
Of course, yeah. So that's another great opportunity that we have riding for Giant. They've got a really good Trance Edition bike, which is a little bit smaller. It's based around a 5-inch. The Rain here is based around 6-inch, and like I said, we beefed that up to 180mm. And a 180mm fork with a coil, it's like a downhill bike from 10 years ago, so it's very, very efficient. We do go to a Trance, which is a little smaller. It's usually got a 150 or a 160mm fork up front. Usually with a Trance, we'll run an air shock. It's a little bit more nimble. I ride an extra large size frame. I'm 6'1", and I find the extra room in the cockpit allows me to corner a little bit better. It's a little bit more stable at speed, and being able to swap from a Trance to a Rain, dependent on the condition, just adds to those little 1%ers that add up, that help us fight for those precious seconds and hundredths of a second. Having a little bit smaller bike that's a little bit more nimble, it might you might be able to get on the pedals a little bit harder coming out of a corner, or just get through those tight trees a little bit quicker, and it all adds up. It's all part of the game, and it's all part of the process, and making sure your bike setup is crucial. Knowing your clickers, knowing what your low speed's on at the fork here, knowing how many clicks of compression is on your shock, knowing what PSI is in your tires. That's a really, really big one. I change the PSI in my tires almost every stage. You know, if you have 6 or 7 stages over a weekend, I carry a pump, I carry a Schwalbe tire pressure gauge, and that's a really big advantage for you as a racer to know that stuff, because then you know how your bike performs. You know if your front end's a bit twitchy or a bit washy, you know, is it the track or is your tire pressure too high, you know, or is your fork too hard? If your O-ring isn't quite getting to the top of the travel, maybe your fork's too hard. You know, if it is going to the top of the travel and you're getting stuck, maybe it's too soft, you know, or maybe if your front tire is a bit hard or your rear tire is a bit hard, or there are a lot of variables there. But if you know your clickers, you know your suspension settings, you know your PSI on your tires, that's going to help you just as much as doing hill reps. Very, very important. So yeah, that's my setup.
Beautiful. Thanks very much, mate. Again, look, a huge amount of information there from Josh. You know, it obviously takes a long time to learn all that.
It takes a long time, and I'm still learning. Every race I go to, I learn a little bit more about suspension setup. I learn a little bit more about my tire setup. I've had a lot of ups and downs over the last few years with mechanicals, and my team's been working really, really hard to fix that. And I think, you know, with myself learning, developing the bike, developing my setup, my suspension settings, my tire settings to avoid the flat tires, to avoid the mechanicals, and to avoid those issues that ruin races, you know, I think we're heading in the right direction. So yeah, it takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. It takes, you know, hours and hours of riding and testing and failing and figuring it out, figuring out where the limits are, figuring out what sucks, figuring out what's really good. And is it actually good? You know, a lot of people get stuck in this mindset of it's comfortable and it works, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, yeah, but don't be scared to step outside the box. You know, there could be a better suspension setting. Don't be scared to listen to people. You know, like I thought I had an amazing suspension setting only 2 years ago. And then we worked with our suspension technicians from the Giant Factory Off-Road team, and all of a sudden I did a full 180 with my fork, and it's never been better. I dramatically increased my front end grip. I dramatically increased the traction that I had, and all of a sudden, bang, there's another few free seconds. It's free time. If you have this setup dialed, it's time that's there. It's time that you don't have to try harder for. It's already there.
Time that when I flog him with the training, that it just makes him even faster.
Yeah, true story.
All right, so thanks very much, mate. It's absolutely fantastic. Loads and loads of things for you guys to take away and really get an understanding of how and the systems and the processes to make your bike faster on you know, in the enduro scene. So thanks very much, guys. I'll catch you out on the road.